but it also comes with a statistical reality that the older you are, the more likely you are to need care of some way, shape, or form, right? It's just a statistical fact. And in that regard, really the sleeper issue in all of this is caregivers don't have the help they need in order to be there for their loved ones when they reach that age, potentially of needing care. But also, on the other side, among care providers, we're living through a sort of an unprecedented workforce shortage around the care provider workforce.
Welcome to Season 2 of Aging Vibrantly podcast, the conversations to empower seniors. I'm Raeann Rideout, the host of the show where we amplify the voices of seniors and leaders in the field of aging, who impart their expertise and wisdom to enhance our understanding of aging issues and ways of living a safe and fulfilling life with respect and dignity. Today, I'm joined with my co-host, Pauline Luening, an active senior in our community and member of our Senior Podcast Advisory Committee. So thank you, Pauline, for joining us today. For this important conversation we are going to have on caregiving in Canada. We are so pleased to have this Season 2 open up with our inspirational leader who's committed to making a change in Canada, to make Canada the best place in the world to give and receive care. Our guest today is James Janeiro. He is the Director of Policy and Government Relations at the Canadian Centre of Caregiving Excellence, a program of the Azali Foundation. James is a public policy and advocacy professional with over a decade of experience in politics, public policy, and advocacy. James leads an ambitious national and pan-Canadian advocacy and policy development agenda focused on substantive and practical reform. So welcome, James, to our opener of our Season 2 podcast.
Wonderful.
So, James,
thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, we're so looking forward to sort of having a conversation about the process and development of the National Seniors Strategy and ways that we can empower older people and people who care for them to get them engaged in some of the work that you're doing in terms of advocacy initiatives across Canada. And I know that you've been doing consultations across every jurisdiction, in person and hybrid, just to get people engaged in this conversation. So, as I mentioned, you are the director of the Canadian Centre Director of Policy and Government Relations at the Canadian Centre for Caregiving Excellence, or CCE, as we may refer to it later. And can you tell us a little bit about the work that CCE does and what your specific role is at the organization?
Sure. So thank you very much for the opportunity. It's great to be here. So we are the Canadian Centre for Caregiving Excellence, or as you say, CCCE. And we are a program of the Azali Foundation, which is the largest non-corporate foundation in Canada. And as you said earlier, our mission is to make Canada the best place in the world to give and receive care, and supporting caregivers and care providers in every part of our wonderful and vast country. We do this in a bunch of different ways. We're a funder, so we fund initiatives and programs and research and knowledge translation that help caregivers, care providers, as well as recipients of care, both in the overall understanding of the field, like around the research stuff that we fund, but also in actual practical, tangible initiatives that we fund out there as well, to help make a difference in the lives of so many people across the country. We're convener, so part of our mission is to break down what have historically been pretty significant silos between the healthcare, aging, disability, and illness sectors across Canada, with the contention that we can all agree on fundamental issues of care, caregiving issues. So let's put down our swords on other things and let's convene around these issues and come up with a shared agenda that we can help move forward together. And the last big piece that we do is around advocacy and policy work. That's my role. So I do all of our government-facing work. We are a pan-Canadian organization, which means that we talk to the federal government, but also increasingly every provincial and territorial government across Canada. And our objective is to be a useful partner and to use the power of advocacy to put forward good ideas to government and have them pick it up, and to be part of these decision-making processes that help move things along, because ultimately many of these issues that caregivers and care providers face in Canada are policy issues that require a policy response. And that's, as I say, most of what I do. I'll say too, if you'll just indulge me for a second,
Sure.
our National Caregiving Strategy is the biggest output, and we'll be talking about that shortly in more depth. But also, I have a very personal connection to this issue. I've been a caregiver on and off my whole life, starting with great-grandparents. I was blessed to be born into a house with 2 great-grandparents kicking around, with as well as grandparents and aunts and parents. And I was part of their care, and then on to my grandparents. I was very involved in my now late grandfather's care around his far too long journey with dementia and a couple other things. And he passed away about 3 years ago, coming up next month. And presently, I'm very involved in my grandmother's care. She's doing well, thank goodness. But the big thing for her is she's lonely. She lives in a big old Victorian house in the west end of Toronto. She insists on staying at home, and we do everything we can to make that both a real possibility and a good possibility for her. We've even got my dog involved in this. He's literally over there today. He goes over there twice a week to keep her company and have, add some whimsy into her life a couple times a week. So issues around aging and seniors are very, very, very close to my heart. And there's so much more we can and need to be doing for this population that really built our country and to whom we owe so much.
Yeah, I think that almost every one of us is going to engage at some point in a caregiving role. We do it as if we have children, and then as our parents get older, I think inevitably it could be even your neighbor, that's someone that you're very close to if you live in a rural community. So I appreciate you sharing that personal experience with us, because I think it really does shed a light on that we're all going to be in this role at some point. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you.
Okay. Our podcast is focused on seniors and caregiving issues that may impact them. Now, I have a 2-part question for you, James. First part, the research and work of CCCE supports and empowers caregivers and care providers, all ages and diverse communities. Can you give us examples of the differences between caregivers and care providers as it relates to older adults, please?
Sure thing. And I'll start just by saying a couple of things about the nomenclature. So to us, a caregiver is anybody who provides unpaid care to somebody else. Everything from childhood disability all the way up to end of life, long-term care, challenges related to aging, as well as disability, lifelong disability, episodic disability, mental health challenges, addiction challenges, whatever the case may be. So if you're in that situation where you're providing care to somebody else, we call you a caregiver, and you are firmly within the brief of CCCE. The one part of the space we don't touch is neurotypical, everything is okay childcare. When we launched that space, we determined early on that space was pretty full already of organizations like ours trying to move the needle on these issues. So we kind of parked them to one side, but everything from childhood disability onward is firmly within our bailiwick. So it's caregivers, care providers, also part of our work. That's the paid care workforce. So you do this for a living. Think of your personal support workers, for example, supporting people to live in the community with home care, or to live in more residential settings like long-term care facilities and so on and so forth. Also direct support professionals. They're called different things in different parts of the country, but direct support professionals who support people with disabilities to live in the community with some help, as well as home care workers, respite workers, and so on and so forth. So that frontline workforce, we call care providers, and that is also within our bailiwick. Now, to your specific question about the differences between caregivers and care providers vis-a-vis older adults, there are a couple of things to keep in mind here. So the over 65 demographic in our country is the fastest growing part of our population. This is a reality. And with that comes a number of blessings of experience, of longevity, of the wonderful time I've had being so close to so many grandparents. But it also comes with a statistical reality that the older you are, the more likely you are to need care of some way, shape, or form, right? It's just a statistical fact. And in that regard, really the sleeper issue in all of this is caregivers don't have the help they need in order to be there for their loved ones when they reach that age, potentially of needing care. But also, on the other side, among care providers, we're living through a sort of an unprecedented workforce shortage around the care provider workforce that makes it virtually impossible in many parts of our country to find that kind of paid support that a person and their family of caregivers might need to help them with their care responsibilities. And the reality out there is that if you have needs out in the community and you're doing well, odds are it's because you've got both caregivers and paid care providers involved in your life in some form, one way, shape, or another. So both of those things are critically important, and we're facing monumental policy challenges in both of those areas that have a particular impact on older Canadians.
Thank you. And you have partially answered part B, which is in your 2024 report, Caring in Canada, your agency surveyed 3,000 caregivers and care providers. In the executive summary, you stated, quote, Canada is facing a caregiving crisis that will only get worse without real action. A perfect storm is brewing. Demand for care is growing. Caregivers are aging. The number of available caregivers is shrinking, end quote. Can you elaborate a little more on this observation as it pertains to an aging population, please?
So as I said a couple of moments ago, the numbers are pretty clear that the older segment of our population is the fastest growing portion of our demographic pyramid at the moment. And I would argue consequently have the most at stake presently in this caregiving crisis that we're living with. I'll say off the bat, though, the issue is not needing care. Needing care is part of the human experience, right? Yeah. Everybody needs care at some point in their lives, nor is giving care an issue, right? It is also part of the human condition that we are sort of pre-programmed as humans to love others, and part of the way we show our love is by giving them the care that they need to be okay. So our problem, or the problem, is not needing care or needing to give care, but rather an insufficient policy response there to help you with that reality of needing care or giving care to people in your lives. That's the core issue that we're dealing with here, is that basket of things that we all need, that tapestry that we're supposed to be able to tap into is pretty threadbare at the moment and needs some shouldering and some repair in order to meet the challenges of the moment. And it's not just about that aging demographic, though, as I say, that's a big issue. It's also the fact that families are getting smaller, right? So I'm an only child. When my mom and dad need help, I'm the only one in terms of their children, because I'm an only child, who's able to give care. Thinking back to my grandmother, who I mentioned a few moments ago, she's got 3 daughters. So in her situation, it's me and her 3 daughters. So it's a broader network of 4 people. 4 is very different than 1. Because in addition, because of smaller families, you'll have more and more of the challenges of the sandwich generation, which we were talking about just a moment ago, of trying to support an older part of your family, as well as looking after yourself and your family, including potentially children at the same time. And there are real numbers attached to this. So caregivers in Canada provide an average of 5 hours of care per day, which on the highest end ends up being basically a second full-time job. right? That's 30 hours of care. If you're on the higher end of the caregiving spectrum, if you will. And many caregivers, over half, tell us that they consistently feel overwhelmed, tired, or that their mental or physical health has suffered as a result of their care responsibilities. Also, 1/5 of all caregivers in Canada today are over 65. So let's think about this for a second. If you're over 65 and you're providing care, you yourself are an older Canadian, and odds are you're providing support to another older Canadian. I think about, in this case, I think about back to my grandmother and my grandfather, where she was a primary caregiver in his life. She insisted on him staying at home. He was bedridden the last 2 years of his life. It was a very, very difficult care situation. And my grandmother, who was only 5 years younger than my grandfather, was that primary on deck. To do that kind of care. So that's another sort of layer to this, that you've got older people looking after other older people. And statistically, the older you are, also the less likely you are to access services and ask for help. In large part because those services are so hard to access in the first place, that if you struggle, say, with technology, or there's a language barrier, or you're in a more remote community, or you're a bit more disconnected from your community, it makes it all the harder to try to tap into what little support there is actually out there. The last thing I'll say about this, then we'll move, I'll pass it back to you, is there's also a financial toll to this. So our report that you mentioned a moment ago, Caring in Canada, revealed that caregivers spend on average $1,000 a month on out-of-pocket expenses related to caregiving. Yes. That is hard enough when you are working, you're a double income household, and there's money flowing in and out of the household accounts. If you're an older Canadian living on a more fixed income, maybe living on a pension, and those expenses still continue to add up, that is an extra pinch. So in addition to the cost of living crisis that we've all lived through over the last few years, think about this other sort of suck on the household finances at the same time that make it all the harder. And yes, you could reasonably make the argument that when you reach age of retirement, certain other benefits kick in. Of course, the pension, also lower cost or free medicine, home visits and things like that. That is all true. But those base out-of-pocket costs go up exponentially, like incontinence supplies, for example, or dietary supplements, home modifications, and so on and so forth. So I could blather on about this for a very long time, but I'll pass it on there, and I think that sums it up.
Yeah, I think you made some really good points, and some of the things I was going to ask you've addressed around the access to the services, because it is a systemic issue when people are in those situations where they're in the rural communities or they don't have children, like you have mentioned, and having the funds to pay for it. If people who are in low income, then what do they do? How do they access? So the need to have a national strategy to address this, to pay for the loss of productivity for people in the workplace. Like, are our workplaces changing to meet the needs of caregivers when they do have to leave, early, or the lack of absenteeism? They can't come in today because their parent ended up in hospital last night. Is there things? Are you seeing more of those trends happening as well as the population ages? Given your work and the research that you're doing?
We are, yes. Short answer, yes. A slightly longer answer is yes, but slowly. So we're starting to see workplaces recognize that there's a double-edged sword to this. So caregivers are 1 in 4 people today. Half of us will be a caregiver at some point in our lives. So if you are running a business and you're hiring people, you cannot ignore those numbers, right? You cannot narrow your talent pool that you're hiring from to 3 and 4 or 1 and 2, basically looking for people who don't have these caring responsibilities. So that's number one. Number two, the other side of this is that caregivers show themselves to be resourceful, productive, self-starters, because that's part of being a caregiver, right? That is on your shoulders to do that extra work, to find the services, to find that extra little bit of help, do the research, to make those calls, etc. And that kind of get up and go is exactly the kind of skill set that employers look for in really good employees. So we're starting to see workplaces come forward with things like caregiving benefits or caregiving leaves, or at least leading with flexibility in the workplace so that if you need to end your day early to go take care of a care responsibility, you just put up your hand and say you got to go, rather than make you tap into sick days or vacation days and that sort of thing. The World Economic Forum last year, so at the end of 2024, identified caregiving as one of the top 4 trends that will define the workplace in the coming years, in particular around making it possible for people to balance care responsibilities and work responsibilities. The lack of support today around caregivers being able to balance those two things is costing us all about $1.3 billion in lost productivity every year. And in a time when we're facing some pretty crazy headwinds from our friends down south, all these threats to our economy, we need everybody working to their full potential, maximizing the assets that we have in Canada today. And at the moment, it's sort of like we're fighting that battle with one arm tied behind our back, because so many caregivers are not properly supported to be able to balance their work responsibilities and their care responsibilities. And in the end, they do what any of us would do, which is you put your family first, right? So you work less, or you quit your job, or you go on a leave or something without the support that you could benefit from your employer to give you that extra flexibility in the workplace to make all that possible.
So your organization, I think, is only 2 to 3 years now.
3 years.
And 3 years, and I mean, significant strides significant accomplishments have been made in that time. So, what led to you taking the main driver here of getting a national strategy in place? And I know, and I guess what your response was when you saw a year ago, I guess a little bit more, when you saw the budget come out and you saw there was funding for that. And where is that status now in terms of with the change of our political landscape since that initial announcement and where we are now?
So we've been calling for a national caregiving strategy from the very beginning. So we're about, as I said, just about 3 years into our existence here at CCCE. This has been one of our top asks from day one. And so I have gone blue in the face. I've literally gone hoarse talking to any politician, elected leader of any political stripe federally to make this case around the need for a national caregiving strategy. Eventually, I started to get questions back along the lines of, yeah, James, whatever, strategy, whatever. What do you actually want to see in that strategy? Let's get to brass tacks about specific ideas in there. And that's when we cobbled together this national co-creation process that we led over the course of about a year, starting with our summit in November 2023 and ending really with the release of our document in February of 2025. And that was a combination of in-person and online and hybrid conversations in every part of the country, from coast to coast to coast, rooms very large and very small, everything from 1,000-person conferences with me or my colleagues up there in front talking about these issues and soliciting responses, all the way down to one-on-one coffees with people, again, in every part of the country. We also convened what we've called our Care Champions Table, which is a group of about 50 or so leaders and individuals from key organizations attached to this. So to my earlier point about breaking down those silos, we convened that table around to make sure we had folks from the aging sector, healthcare, illness, disability, mental health, kids, seniors, episodic disability, and so on, the whole gambit of this whole sector, all around one table where I would lead a conversation every month around ideas that either our research had come forward with or that we had heard in our consultations, to test with them to see if we were onto something there. So that was another part of this. And we also had a pretty robust online platform that people could use and just tell us what they think. If you've got 5 minutes, 5 hours, 50 minutes, anything in between, just give us your feedback on what you think, what people think should be included in the strategy. Now, about Oh boy, 2 months into all of that, we got the government's commitment in the budget of April 2024 to develop a national caregiving strategy, as well as to convene a sector table on the care economy. That was a pretty momentous event. That was the first time our federal government had really nodded that this is an issue that needed a federal response. I'll be honest with you, though, not too much has happened on that particular commitment since. That sector table has been struck. It was struck just before the federal election kicked off back in March. So that's progress. But as we've seen in the headlines over the last year or so, it's been a pretty crazy year in federal politics.
Yeah.
A lot of right? A lot of things started and stopped. And, with this change, that change, like a lot has happened in the last year. We're now on the other side of the federal election. And in that federal election, we managed to secure platform commitments from all the parties on caregiving issues, including a commitment from the federal Liberals, now the re-elected government, to continue the work to develop that national caregiving strategy. So that all happened. We're now coming up on, I guess, 2 months since the election. We know who our minister is. We know who to talk to. Those conversations are starting in earnest. I'm feeling pretty good. I wasn't feeling so good, a few months ago because of how slow all that progress was. But today I'm feeling great. Good signals from the federal government that they're going to pick this up again in earnest, in large part, again, because of the economic realities we're living in right now, and realizing that this is, again, that fighting with one arm behind our back. We really need to solve this, both for really good social and moral health and social service reasons, but also for brass tacks economic reasons as well. So that's the argument we're running with at the moment.
Great.
Okay. Speaking of the national strategy, your agency has shown leadership in gathering data on the state of caregiving in this country. Thank you very much for undertaking this work and demonstrating the urgent need to address this potential crisis. As a result of your report on caregiving in Canada, you identified 5 top priorities the federal government should focus on when considering support for caregivers and care providers. Can you elaborate on what those 5 priorities are and why they are the 5 pillars?
Of course. So in February of this year, we launched our strategy, National Caregiving Strategy for Canada. Here it is, available on our website, if anybody would like to read it. Both the very large, voluminous version and a much shorter 3-page summary. As well. So by all means, folks, and we can maybe you can share the link to our website.
For sure.
The materials.
And our show notes. Yeah.
So we launched it in February to some acclaim. And I'll note, though, just before we get on to the specifics, that we started with the feds for a reason. You may say, James, a lot of this stuff is actually in the provincial area of concern in Canada. Healthcare is provincial. Social services are provincial. That is true. But a large part of this sphere, as I'll elaborate on in just a moment, does live within the realm of the federal government. So we decided to go with the feds because they're the one government in Canada that can touch us all at the same time.
Yes.
So only the federal government is able to raise boats for all caregivers at once. We are doing that provincial work in individual provinces to get into depth around those healthcare, social services, and other issues. But we started with the feds because of that cross-Canada impact that you're able to get only through the power of His Majesty's federal government. So that's why we are where we are today. Our 5 pillars are basically, in short, number 1, supports and programs and services for caregivers themselves. Part of this is financial stuff, like the Canada Caregiver Credit, for example, that needs to be made refundable rather than the status quo of it being non-refundable.
Yes.
As well as the need to develop a caregiving benefit, a need to look at care insurance across Canada, and the need for targeted supports for caregiver mental health and well-being to stave off burnout, not just address it, but to stave off burnout in the first place. So that's big basket of support right there around caregivers. Second is around supporting caregivers to balance work and education. To your earlier question, Raeann, about people being able to work while they're caregivers, this is addressed in our second pillar. This is all about making leaves and benefits work for working caregivers, starting with our EI system. So our employment insurance system is not perfect, and it doesn't touch everybody, but it touches a lot of people. And we figured out how to support people when they have a baby, with parental leave, beginning of life. It's time to apply that same logic to other times where you have to care for people in your life as well. So this idea of your job will be protected, and through your contributions to the system, you'll get some money back while you're out of work to provide care for somebody else. So that's the basics of that.
Very practical, right? Yes.
Thank you. The other one that I think might be particularly pertinent to your listeners is around our Canada Pension Plan. So the CPP is our national sort of inheritance as Canadians. Our ancestors worked very, very hard to cobble it together and to support it. It's the envy of large parts of the world. But if you're one of the multitudes of caregivers who take time out of the workforce to provide care for somebody else, you end up being punished when you retire through lower CPP payments every month. And this, by the way, particularly impacts women, because women are much more likely than men to take time out of the workforce, provide care for somebody else over the longer term. So our suggestion here is when you retire, and you do the paperwork and you get that piece of paper showing your income against every year that you were working, for those years where you were providing care for somebody and your income is lower or zero, you should be able to put up your hand and say, actually, for those, we're saying up to 5 years, for those 5 years, I was a caregiver to X, to my husband, to my wife, to my sister, to my son, whatever. That's why I wasn't working at full capacity. All right, says the CRA, and the CPP authorities will apply your average earnings over your working life to those years, effectively correcting this problem of punishing you for the rest of your life as a senior receiving the CPP because you provided care to somebody else. So that's another big one in that category.
That's excellent.
Thank you. Around Pillar 3 is dedicated financial supports for recipients of care. So caregivers tell us the best thing you can do for them is support the person they're caring for. And the second best thing you can do is support them as caregivers. We are a large, wealthy, generous G7 country. We should be able to do both. So on the care recipient front, let's fix the disability tax credit. Let's fix the medical expenses tax credit. Let's properly fund the Canada Disability Benefit, which is set to kick in this year. This month, actually, later on. And all together, put some more financial support in the pockets of recipients of care who need some help. Only two more, I promise, here. Number 4, pillar number 4 is around the care provider workforce. The kind of the big idea here is a minimum wage for care providers across the country. The Fed's committed to doing this way back during COVID to a $25 minimum wage for personal support workers specifically. That is yet to be implemented across the board. It's in fits and starts. So parts of the country, this is working. Others, not so much yet. We're saying let's implement that across the board. And by the way, let's also expand that to the rest of the care provider workforce as well, rather than only personal support workers. Lastly, pillar number 5 is around government leadership and recognition. Basically, let's make sure that our government recognizes that this is a standalone issue. Let's have some legislation to back up the strategy. Let's get a council in place to make this permanent. Let's direct the incredible power of our research agencies, like the Canadian Institutes for Health Research and others, to add caregiving issues to their research roster. And let's also focus in on military and veteran caregivers as one population that's entirely within the federal government's domain and make their lives a little bit easier. These are people who put their lives on the line for king and country to keep us all safe. We need more of them, not fewer of them, as the world gets a bit more dangerous over time. And this is why our Prime Minister, I think last week or the week before, made a pretty big commitment around raising wages for people in the Canadian Forces. These are hard lives, and the least we can do is back them up. And the family, which is often the caregiver, alongside the serving member of the forces, are referred to as the power behind the uniform. So this is that support network that's there to help them when they need help or if other family members need help while they're away. So let's focus in on that population as well to help address some of these issues, again, firmly within the realm of the federal government. Those are our 5. Nice and easy, nothing too big or complicated there, but happy to get into any other detail you'd like about any of the above. Just fire and ask.
Speaking of those 5, when you defined all those priorities, how did CCCE include caregivers in the conversation, or how do you do that, and how do you carry that forward?
So in the process that we ran to lead us to this point of the National Caregiving Strategy, we put caregivers front and center in all of that to make sure that we were always having regular conversations of all sizes, large, medium, small, one-on-one, online, in person, hybrid, and so on, with caregivers and care providers themselves, where they were comfortable in spaces that they understand, and in using terms and experiences that resonate with them. So it was a true co-design process from beginning to end, where caregivers were involved in every step along the way, everything from, the primary desk research that many of us were doing in the background, to those conversations we were having, to that care champions table, to all those conferences that I mentioned a moment ago. Caregivers were a critical part of all of that in order to really, again, hear from them directly about what they needed to see in our National Caregiving Strategy. Without their voice, this is just a list of policy ideas drawn up by wonks like me. This had to be instigated, researched, validated, and backed up by people living this experience every day. And I am proud to say that it has been. This is really a product of love for many, many caregivers and care providers across the country who were proud to be part of this. All told, beginning to end, we spoke to thousands of caregivers and care providers, and I hope they feel their voice heard in this. We certainly hear that from them every day.
When you're doing, I guess just a follow-up question in terms of the caregivers that you spoke to and even in the caregiver workforce, was there differences in terms of different cultural communities or individuals from different diverse communities that their caregiving needs or access to care really, there was some more barriers than maybe other counterparts?
Absolutely. And this was one of the harder parts, to be honest with you, of doing this work. I come from the Portuguese community. I'm first generation born here. My whole family is Portuguese. So I did everything I could to have conversations within my own community in the language, in those media, in the radio shows, on the newspapers, that sort of thing, to try to get at least one community that I know very well. Our team comes from other communities, and they were able to tap into expertise within their own communities as well. But one of the lessons of all of this is that if you're really trying to break through to those multicultural communities, it is very, very hard to do, and you need help, and you need time, and you need some local leaders. So now that we're on the other side of the strategy, part of our dissemination work is getting into those rooms and spending that time now to try to have these conversations with caregivers in those communities and get the message out to them. Because statistically as well, if you're, say, I'll use my own community as an example. I'll draw a picture for you of an older mom, certainly over 65, who's been providing care to a son with a disability his whole life. In my community, it's more likely than not that you're not connected to services out there. You're not connected to an organization that supports and provides respite or day programming and stuff like that for one reason or another. Mom falls, breaks her hip, and suddenly you've got a crisis where mom is the only stable care provider in that network as a caregiver to her son. In those situations, we've got a crisis and the system takes over. There are so many cases like that we hear about every day in these communities of people who were more removed from the services and supports that are out there. So part of what we're trying to do is tell these communities it's okay to ask for help. Okay, it is okay to put your hand up and say you need help. And by the way, this is where you can go to start that conversation about the kind of help that's available.
I think that's so important because so many people don't know where to go, how to access it. It's a pride sometimes that, I have to look after mom. It's my job, especially spouses. I hear that often. It's my role, my responsibility, caring for their wife or partner who has dementia and they don't trust anybody or they feel it's their responsibility. So they don't get any respite care. They don't get any break, even though there's services there, but they don't feel that it's, important for them to take time for themselves. That's just their job. So trying to change that mindset that you need a break and you need support is so important. So to sort of leading into that the question around engaging caregivers, I know you have a caregiver podcast as well in terms of the work that you're doing of Who Cares and your website has got a wealth of information. And I see on social media, I follow you as well. And I see the little posters that are profiling caregivers, right? Telling their story. And so can you tell us how else, we're trying to get, as you move forward, you're trying to get more people engaged in your caregiving conversation. So what is the message that you would like to give our listeners who may be caregivers to get more involved in advocating for the work that you're doing or in their own communities and how they would go about doing that?
So we need your help. We need desperately the help of caregivers and care providers and recipients of care across the country to make this a real public policy priority. I spent much of my career in and around politics in particular, and the intersection of politics and government. 1 in 4 Canadians is a politically unignorable statistic. 1 in 2 Canadians is definitely unignorable if you want to get yourself elected in this country. So we all need to band together to put this issue firmly on our public agenda, and we don't get that without caregivers, care providers, and recipients of care in every part of the country taking part in this fight and helping us out with this. So I would urge everybody listening, watching, however you access this, find our website, canadiancaregiving.org, or just Google Canadian Centre for Caregiving Excellence. It'll take you to our website. You'll have all of the documents that you might be interested in reading, like our strategy, like our Caring in Canada report and others. But also it'll point you to our Act on Care campaign. This is very simple. It takes 3 minutes. You click on the little button, you type in your name and you'll put your postal code and you hit go, and it'll automatically generate an email to the Prime Minister, the relevant ministers, and your local member of parliament, sharing with them many of the statistics that we've been talking about today, as well as our policy priorities, and urging them to, surprise, surprise, act on care. We're well into the tens of thousands of responses by now, and we need more of them. We need more of them. So everybody, please reach for your phone, reach for your computer, CanadianCaregiving.org, go to Act on Care, take part in our campaign. Pretty please.
That's great. I mean, it's such an easy way, and part of this podcast is to empower older adults and their caregivers, family members to, make a future where seniors can be safe and live with dignity. So what little 3 minutes of someone's time can make a significant difference in pushing that agenda forward to get further funding and security, not only for the future, our current generation, but our future generation, which maybe, as you were saying, is potentially in crisis at this point and could be if we don't make any changes. So I like to thank you and commend you for all the work that you've been doing and the amount of advocacy work that you've played in advocating to federal government and other jurisdictions and all parties, because I think this is it's a nonpartisan issue that everyone is affected by. So I commend you and the organization for all that work. we ask our listeners or ask our guests one last question, everybody, about what advice you would give to empower someone to age vibrantly. I'm not sure if you have any words of wisdom.
That's a great question. Okay, I'll say a couple of things. Number one, to the best of your ability, get out of your house. Go outside, go shopping, go to the coffee shop, go to the library, go to church, go to the synagogue. And I'm speaking, it's as if I'm talking to my grandmother right now, because this is a regular refrain to her, right? Her mobility is slipping. It's a bit harder for her to do that, but I can tell when she hasn't felt up to leaving the house for the last couple of days. I can hear in her voice, or when I visit her, that it's dramatically different than if she's been able to go to her corner store, or go to the church, or go to the bakery, or see a friend or a family member somewhere else. So as best you can, get out of your house, move around, see the world, talk to people, wave, say hi to dogs, say hi to kids, do all that stuff. But also the other part of the equation, and again, I feel like I'm talking to my grandmother, don't be shy to ask for help. If you're feeling low today, if you're feeling lonely today, pick up the phone and call someone. Right? This is a two-way equation. Pick up the phone, make a call, just say hello, and reach out a little bit, because just as caregivers work so hard to provide care for the people they love, we're also not mind readers. So we also don't know what's out there. So it's two ends of the same equation. Get out there, please engage with the world. And if you're feeling low or need help, make a call and ask for some help. There's no shame or judgment in that whatsoever. That's what humanity is all about.
Excellent.
Wonderful.
Words of wisdom.
Wonderful.
I totally agree. And the little dog therapy is always helpful, as mine are outside barking at me right now. So thank you so much for your leadership and for taking time for joining us today. And we can all play a role in making this the best world to give and receive care, as you mentioned, in this vision that we have. So I thank you again for joining us. We will put the links to your organization and to the campaign in our show notes for people to access and to get in contact with your organization. So thank you again. We appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pauline. Thank you, Raeann. Take care.
Thanks. To find more information about the Canadian Centre for Caregiver Excellence and links to resources mentioned in today's episode, please visit our show notes. To learn more about abuse prevention, visit eapon.ca. Aging Vibrantly, Conversations to Empower Seniors is hosted by Raeann Rideout, produced and edited by Lisa Whitfield and Todd Miller of Podcast Experts, with original music produced by Red Path Audio. Please rate, review, and subscribe to Aging Vibrantly wherever you get your podcast. If you're on Apple Podcast, give us a great review and rating. If you prefer to watch interviews, full episodes are on EAPO's YouTube channel. Be sure to check us out. Until next time, stay vibrant.